What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking about DMZ in Modern Warfare 4. We just recently got a bunch of information in a blog post, and we now have a trailer from the Xbox Game Showcase. And so in today's video, I wanted to give a very high-level overview of what we can expect to see in DMZ, keeping in mind I'm not going into literally every detail we've learned, because there are plenty of people that have already covered that. You can read through the blog for yourself if you want every little detail about it. But I more so wanted to spend the time in this video sharing my opinions on what we've learned so far, and I wanted to touch on some hot topics surrounding this reveal as well, like the fact that currently there are no plans for a PvE-only mode. So diving right in, high-level overview, this is an extraction shooter that, as I said, is PvPvE. It's going to be taking place on a map called Hyjin, and this is set somewhere on the border of Russia and the Korean Peninsula. With the map, we'll have a dynamic weather system, and there will be various environmental effects on there. There's also going to be story-driven missions that will expand the narrative, as well as like side missions that you can complete. You can also just free roam and loot. They mentioned with this, there's a lot of improvements coming to how their AI systems are handled, so they're going to be more dynamic and reactive, and they'll actually work together as a squad, they mentioned. There's also going to be AI vehicle encounters, both ground and air vehicles. And they did mention the threat level of the AI will escalate as a match progresses as well. So the AI can actually start hunting you a lot more actively later in the match. Now with the AI, we have lieutenants, and these are kind of like mini bosses, it seems, that you can hunt down and kill for some potentially higher level loot, as well as dog tags that you can extract with for a bunch of cash. And there's also commanders that command tanks, drone swarms, helicopters, juggernauts, and elite strike teams. And they did mention as well, stealth is going to be a part of this system, and this is going to be especially useful for the solo players out there. But with this, there's going to be an actual stealth meter, so you can see how close you are to being spotted, and that can guide you if you want to play more stealthily. So it seems like lots of big improvements when it comes to AI and how you interact with the AI in the world, compared to the DMZ beta from Modern Warfare 2. Next up, another huge leap forward with DMZ this time around is the forward operating base. This is going to be your central hub, kind of like a mini HQ from COD World War II, where you and your squad go there between deployments. And this is a playable area, and it can be upgraded over time. So within this, you're going to have your 3D printer, which allows you to craft various items and pieces of equipment. And this 3D printer can be upgraded over time, so you unlock access to be crafting more and more advanced pieces of gear. And that's going to be a part of the progression system long term with this. Also in your FOB, you can access your stash. We're going to have an actual proper stash and inventory, so when you extract with items, you actually keep them between DMZ matches, like a normal extraction shooter, but unlike the previous DMZ. Also, we're going to have an in-game cash system that will go alongside that, and you'll earn cash by completing missions or by selling loot. And with that cash, you can buy weapons in between deployments as well when you're in your forward operating base, and alongside that, you can buy attachments and you can create your weapon builds. We've also got bounty boards on there. We'll get into bounties in just a little bit. And then we've also got a firing range to test our guns out in the FOB. So lots going on there, and I think that's one of the more exciting improvements that are coming with this version of DMZ. But next, let's talk about the active duty operators. So with this, you'll have access to use multiple operators, and they will each have their own persistent backpack, persistent loot, and persistent trait tree. So you level them up individually, and you select the path you want to go when it comes to your traits. So you might specialize one operator specifically for combat, whereas another one might be really geared toward looting more effectively. So you do have that ability to level up multiple operators, and then you can select which of those operators you want to take in with you. Although they did clarify, any trait points that you earn with an operator can only be spent on that operator, so you can't earn a bunch of trait points and then use that to buff up another operator. And something interesting with the operators is if you fail to exfil, if you die, normally in a more traditional extraction shooter, when you die, you lose everything you had with you. Whereas with this, it puts that operator on a cooldown if you die, and you can spend the in-game cash to bring them back and continue your progression without being reset. Now, I assume you're still going to be losing any loot that you had in your backpack, but my understanding of this, which could be a little bit off, but my understanding is that character will come back with the weapon and attachments, their backpack level that they had, as well as any armor. Basically, the gear that the operator had will be saved, just not the loot in your backpack. So with this, they did mention they wanted there to still be high stakes, and they wanted it to feel like you're still being set back if you end up failing to exfil successfully. But they also wanted to make it feel more forgiving than a more hardcore traditional extraction shooter. And I think this is an area that's going to be a little bit polarizing. Some people will hate this because to them, it needs to be a full-on super hardcore extraction shooter where you have extremely high stakes. Whereas for others, that sort of thing turns them away from an extraction shooter. and they don't mind being set back a little bit, but they don't want to feel like they've just wasted a bunch of time and ended up much worse off after a play session than before. They want steady, consistent improvement with perhaps some setbacks and some things that'll slow you down and some roadblocks that get in the way, but you're always at least making progression forward. And honestly, I think for a Call of Duty extraction shooter, this makes sense, being a little bit more accessible than the more hardcore extraction shooters. Call of Duty is known for having a very wide reach and a very large and largely casual audience. And so I don't think any rational people were really expecting that DMZ was going to be like the most hardcore, high-stakes extraction shooter on the market. It's Call of Duty. Of course, there are going to be elements to it that make it more accessible than the more hardcore games that are out there. So I do think it makes sense within the context of this franchise. Now, another big thing to mention here with this version of DMZ that's designed to keep PvP in check, or at least make PvP a little more interesting and kind of balanced out, is the bounty system. With this, apparently, if you hunt other players and you are PvPing and killing other players in-game, you can do that and potentially be rewarded quite heavily because you can loot them and you get their dog tags, for instance, and you can extract those dog tags and apparently get a bunch of cash for that. But there's added risk for doing that because by killing enemy players, you end up on the bounty board. And when you have a bounty on you, you're easier to locate and track, and people will be rewarded for killing you and collecting that bounty. So if you decide to kill another player, you're now increasing the risk that you're taking on because other players are more likely to come hunt you now to collect that bounty on you. Now, interestingly, you can also reduce that bounty status on yourself, apparently, by collecting bounties on other players. So if you do kill an enemy player and you have a bounty on you, but there's another enemy player on the map that also has a bounty on their head, if you go and kill them, it will reduce your bounty status. Presumably, in that case, bringing you back to a state where you don't even have a bounty on your head. And I personally really like that dynamic. I think that does help keep things in check a little bit and make sure there's that little bit of extra risk if you just want to go in and slay enemy players. Like, you can still do that, and I think that's totally fine. That's a big part of the game, but there is also a clear trade-off to doing that. And there we go. That wraps it up for the high-level overview. Those are the main points that I really wanted to cover. Again, they have gone into more details and shared more depth when it comes to a lot of this stuff, but that's at least the basics and a lot of the improvements that we're getting from the DMZ beta. And overall, it does look like this is going to be a very big leap forward from the DMZ beta. And I'm glad to see that. The DMZ beta didn't hook me at all, and the biggest reason behind that is I just felt like there was no long-term progression. There was nothing you were really working toward. And it also felt the items you were looting outside of like your armor vests and the guns, for instance, it just didn't really seem to matter between matches because there was no stash, there was no cash that I remember at least. Perhaps something like that was added down the road, but at least early on when I first tried it, there was just nothing there to really hook me. So this looks like a huge leap forward and more of a proper extraction shooter, albeit a little more accessible than a traditional extraction shooter. However, there are a few big things that come up, and one of the big things is this is going to be possibly the most expensive extraction shooter to get into, because most other extraction shooters are a much lower price, or in some cases they're even free to play, whereas for DMZ, it's not free to play. You have to buy Modern Warfare 4 if you want to gain access to that. And so if you just want to play an extraction shooter and you're not interested in the other elements of Modern Warfare 4, then that's going to be quite pricey. On the flip side of that, though, that should at least help with the cheating situation to some degree relative to having it free to play or free to access on Game Pass or a very low cost, for instance, because the barrier to re-entry after being banned is going to be higher in that case. But this is something that could potentially hold this mode back, where certain players that would otherwise maybe check this out are just not going to be interested in spending full price for Modern Warfare 4 just to play DMZ. That has created a lot of debate in the community as far as I've seen, is, as I said toward the beginning, this is confirmed to not have a pure PvE mode attached to it. If you're going to play DMZ, there's always going to be a risk of PvP and other players hunting you. And for some, that's how extraction shooters should be. That's a key part of keeping up the tension and making things feel as high stakes and therefore as rewarding as they are. Whereas for others, that's a big turnoff and they may not even play the mode at all because there's no ability to guarantee that you're not going to run into PvP situations. And when it comes to my thoughts on the fact that they are keeping this PvPvE only with no dedicated PvE mode, based on all the information we know so far, I'm fine with them going that route. I do think that keeps the stakes high enough. I do think that makes things feel a lot more rewarding, and it ensures that everybody is getting the full DMZ experience the way that it was meant to be experienced, and that is with that added tension of not knowing if another enemy player is going to find you and kill you. Also, as we saw earlier, they have made things more accessible, so if you die, it's not quite as punishing as many other extraction shooters on the market. And then we've also got that bounty system, so if there is somebody that's going through the lobby and just hunting for enemy players, it appears it's going to be easier to locate those players and either kill them and collect the bounty, or just avoid them entirely. So I think this could work totally fine without a PvP mode. In saying that though, once again, within the context of Call of Duty and its player base, I do think there is a lot of demand for a PvE only experience. We saw that with Endgame and Black Ops 7. That has done extremely well as far as I can tell. I know plenty of people that have put more time into Endgame than any other mode in Black Ops 7, and they love it and they play it consistently. But then of course there's like regular zombies, and I don't think Modern Warfare 4 is going to have zombies or any mode like that. Back in the day we had Modern Warfare zombies as well. That was quite popular among a lot of people. And so I think there is a big demand for that. And as far as I know at this point with Modern Warfare 4, we're not going to be getting that additional PvE only mode that players have become accustomed to in recent years. And so to my knowledge, it's just campaign, multiplayer, and DMZ. And so what happens to those players that are looking for a PvE experience beyond just the campaign? I'm sure some of them will be happy to just dive into DMZ and deal with the fact that other players could potentially kill them. But I think there's going to be a group of players that feel very alienated by not having access to a pure PvE mode. And therefore, while I'm totally on board and fine with them not having a PvE mode, I do think it could be a missed opportunity. And I'd be open to the idea of a pure PvE mode, but it would have to be handled very carefully so that it doesn't water down or harm the standard DMZ mode, which is PvPvE. So I think that means either having a totally separate experience where your progression and everything and your loot is not shared between the standard DMZ mode and the PvE DMZ mode. So you can still play PvE if you want, but it's not like you can play that and stock up and build up your character to then be used in the standard modes. If you're playing PvE, you're stuck in PvE, and that's its own system. Or another way to handle it is to have them both integrated together, and PvE is just a separate mode with the same loot pool, same progression, same operators, but they would have to heavily restrict what's available in PvE. So player progression, I think, would have to be a lot slower. I think certain missions would probably have to be restricted as well, so you can only access certain missions if you play the standard mode. Another big thing is when it comes to loot, if you are able to take loot out in a PvE experience and then put that loot toward your PvP experience, well then I think that loot needs to be very, very limited in the PvE mode. Like there should be a hard cap on the rarity level of loot that you can find in that experience. So you're never going to get anything too special in that mode, but maybe you could use the mode to stock up on some consumables, for instance, just to basically get a bunch of housekeeping stuff out of the way without that extra risk of PvP. I think something like that could potentially work, but as I said, it would have to be handled very, very carefully to ensure that people are still being encouraged to go into the standard PvPvE modes, and to ensure that that remains the main core experience within DMZ that isn't tarnished too heavily by having a pure PvE experience as well. So those are my thoughts on that. If they don't have a pure PvE mode, I think they are going to be missing out on a pretty good chunk of players that would otherwise potentially get very invested into DMZ. But they do also run the risk of harming the standard mode if they bring a PvE mode in and they don't handle it very carefully. In either case, as I said, at the moment, they don't seem to have any plans for a pure PvE mode. And this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Based on everything we know so far about DMZ and the trailer and everything for it, how are you feeling about this mode? And do you see yourself playing it in Modern Warfare 4? And then on top of that, I am curious to know your position on the whole PvE mode being available to play. Do you guys think that is something they should bring to the table or not? Do you think they should stick to their guns on that and not allow that at all? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.